Today we're at the top of Lovell Canyon Road outside of Las Vegas. There's the beast. There's a little parking area right at the summit of the road. We'll do a quick 360. Our goal is to see how far we can go on the lower Wilson Ridge. I've got an adventure on Las Vegas area trails that takes us to the to the Wilson Ridge high point, the south high point. And I've taken the Wilson Ridge all the way up to Harris Mountain. Now we're going to take the Wilson Ridge downward from that southern high point. But this is where we started, and wow, getting through the brush at the bottom. This is the last weekend in August, and brush has been growing all summer. And this has been a very wet summer, and it was preceded by a wet winter. So getting through that brush between the parking area and where I'm standing now was a real challenge. Now, once you get above that area where the brush is, the pathway is a little more open. It's not an actual trail, but there is a pathway. We'll be taking the ridges upward, and soon we'll see that southern high point, and I'll show you some perspective when we get there. And by the way, there is Griffith Peak at the very top. The top of Lovell Canyon. And opposite Griffith Peak to the right would be Harris Mountain. We'll see all that in a bit. Okay, now we've got a bit of a higher view. And just to give you some pointers here, where we are, there we're looking back down at the parking area. That's the summit of Lovell Canyon Road. And then you can see this road heading upward. This is Lovell Summit Road. And at about a quarter mile, it leads to a very nice campground and the trailhead for the main Lovell Canyon Trail, which goes over this hump here and then heads up and around the Lovell Canyon area. There's Griffith Peak. And you see a saddle to the right leading over to Harris Mountain. You can see the very tip of Harris Mountain. And by the way, Harris Mountain is at the summit of the Wilson Ridge. Okay, and now you can see the area's a lot more wide open. Boy, there's a lot of brush below. There are two main ridges from the parking area. This one on the left, or let's say to the north, is the one you want to take. There's another ridge, and I guess you could take that too, but I just don't believe that's going to be as good a ridge to ascend, and it may not put you in the right spot. Okay, so and there's the parking area again. So there's your 360-degree view, and below us is the Torino Children's Camp Complex. and it ascends up this little canyon below us. So let's get to this next high point. We'll be able to see a lot more up there than we can see from where we are right now. Okay, we're at the first high point. Next high point is up ahead. Let's get the lay of the land. There is the southern Wilson Ridge Southern High Point. The Wilson Ridge Southern High Point is our first major goal, and then we take a right and head along the Wilson Ridge. Now, we've taken a left before. We've taken the Wilson Ridge all the way up to Harris Mountain. From Harris Mountain, we have descended the saddle to Griffith Peak. And summited Griffith Peak. And then we have taken Sexton Ridge down from Griffith Peak. It's down to the left. I'll trace it in a moment. And from that high point, we have descended back into Lovell Canyon and caught the Griffith Shadow Loop Trail. Which took us back down to the Lovell Canyon Trail. There's the Torino Children's Camp. Okay, and down to the Lovell Canyon Trailhead, which is right down. Let's see if there's a lot of glare on the screen here. Yeah, that trailhead is in that parking area on Lovell Summit Road. And then you can trace Lovell Summit Road down to where the beast is parked. And then trace your way down Lovell Canyon. And note the reference point that I use when I'm up on these ridges. It's a rocky bluff area that's just off Lovell Canyon Road. And there's Potosi Mountain. It's on the other side of Highway 190. And yeah, we are navigating with the sun blinding us as we seek to weave through the brush and find the ridges that will take us up to the southern high point. From there, we will take a right and head down the Wilson Ridge. Okay, so that gives you the basic lay of the land. Let's get to this next high point. We'll see even more. Okay, we are at a high point where we can look out and we can see a good part of our route. And what we're going to do is we're heading down this ridge over, keeping to the ridges, and then up to that high point you see in the center, which I call the Wilson Ridge Southern High Point. Then we're going to take a right, and we're going to head along that ridge line, which is Wilson Ridge South, basically. We're going to head along the ridge line, circle around, and eventually, if everything works well, we're going to be above Rocky Gap Road, looking down on Bridge Mountain, Rainbow Mountain, Mount Wilson, and on the Rocky Gap Road. And then we would head back down into Lovell Canyon and take Lovell Canyon Road. It'll be about 3 miles back to our start point. Now, this ridge is very important that you take this ridge that we're on. So here's some markers. You see a couple posts. There are no other ridges here, no other hills that have 2 posts like that. When you reach that point and you're on the hill with the 2 posts, that's where you look down and you begin to descend the ridge system, and it takes kind of a crescent up to the Wilson Ridge Southern High Point. Now, we've also in the past taken that Southern High Point. I'll trace it upward to Harris Mountain, where we take a left there. And you can see where the Wilson Ridge summits at Harris Mountain. We're not doing that today. We have done that entire stretch from the South High Point, not all at once, but we've done it. And then from Harris Mountain, you see the Griffith Harris Saddle. On up to Griffith Peak, and then down Sexton Ridge, descend back into Lovell Canyon and catch the Griffith Shadow Trail, and then back to Lovell Canyon Trail, back to Lovell Canyon Trailhead. So that's another adventure. Here's a good look at Lovell Canyon, and we're going to zoom in on Handy Peak. Way too much glare here. But Handy Peak is that little hill that has a rocky outcrop. Sorry, I can't zero in on it because there's just super glare from the sun. And there's the upper section of Lovell Canyon. So there you have the larger perspective. Now let's go ahead and take this ridge system over to the south high point, take a right, and then head down the lower Wilson Ridge. Okay, yeah, we are making some progress here, but as you can see, there's a lot of brush. If you're careful, you can weave amongst the brush, and there are openings, as you can see right here. So you don't need to trample anything, at least nothing living. And the way to get up to that southern high point and navigate this ridge system on the way is you just got to look at the next hill, the next little high point, and that's your goal. Make it to that high point. And then look toward the goal. And see what the next little high point is on the way, and that's how you navigate to the summit of the southern high point and through all this. But again, okay, what I'd say is that there are two things that I want to show you as far as my gear that make a huge difference in this kind of terrain. One is these yucca stock trekking poles that I've created. They are as light as the ones that you buy for $100 or more, but they are stronger. And so when you're faced with a few dead branches, you can use them to work your way through those branches. And then the other thing that I would say is essential is something that I designed this year due to this very trail, and this is what I call sage guards. They're the lower portions of some pant legs that are made of a really tight nylon weave. And you see I'm wearing my shorts, and so it keeps me cool. But yeah, this is essential because otherwise you'd have death by 1,000 cuts in this area and other areas that we've traversed up to this point and areas up ahead. So yeah, those are two pieces of gear that we use. So now, yeah, I'm just going to look for openings. I see a couple potential openings, and a way does open up without having to slash anything that is living. Okay, onward. Okay, we're at another high point. Time to take a look back at where we've come from. Down in this direction, you're going to see the Torino Children's Camp and Ranch. This is the ridge system we have ascended, and we are about at 7,400 feet. And looking down, and there you can see Lovell Summit Road just to the left of the Torino Ranch. Then let's do a quick 360. We're looking down Lovell Canyon, and there's my landmark bluff. It's important to have landmarks up here. Looking around. Now we're looking at the Wilson Ridge, the southern portion of the Wilson Ridge. You can see up ahead is the high point, southern high point. It's about 800 to 1,000 feet above where we are right now. So we need to get up to that high point. Then we're going to take a right, and you can see the direction on the ridge that we're going. It would be nice to get all the way to above Rocky Gap Road. I don't know if I'm going to get that far because this approach has eaten up a lot of time, but if I can get at least halfway there today and then descend back to Lovell Canyon Road, and then another day do the other half. I think that when we're on this point here, when we're at that high point, I think we'll be looking down on Rocky Gap Road, and then it's just a matter of descending that ridge. But I just don't know if we can get that far in the time we have. Being the last week in August, we lose the sun earlier. So anyway, that's where we are now. Here's some cool trees. You can see juniper. Mountain mahogany. And I believe pinyon pine all together here. And then below us is pointed leaf manzanita. And a little cactus. And that might be prickly pear. We don't know. Anyway, yeah, I thought since all these plants were next to each other, I'd identify the ones that I knew. Okay, let's continue on up. Okay, here we are on the south high point of the Wilson Ridge. And we were looking further south. You can see the line of the Wilson Ridge stretching in this direction toward Bridge Mountain. Well, let's see. I'm going to zoom in on White Rock Mountain on the left and then pan over to the right. The next one will be Bridge Mountain, Rainbow Mountain, and then Mount Wilson. Bridge, Rainbow, Wilson. And here's a fellow mountain person thing. I don't know if I can zoom in. Yeah. I don't know if you can see too much glare on the screen, but yeah, it's a hawk or vulture checking me out. Okay, anyway, yeah, we're going south today. There's Lovell Canyon. There is my landmark bluff. So we need to make this huge crescent and then descend to Lovell Canyon Road. That should be interesting. I don't see any sign of Rocky Gap Road at this point. Give you more of an idea where we are. In fact, let's come this way and do a little review of the Wilson Ridge we've already covered. In previous adventures, and you can look on the Wilson Ridge section of Lovell Canyon on LasVegasAreaTrails.com to see all the images and videos going north. But anyway, yeah, I'm gonna pan in on Harris Mountain, and you'll see below it the Wilson Ridge that we took up to Harris Mountain. Harris Mountain, Wilson Ridge below. And by the way, Griffith Peak, And as long as we're in the neighborhood, let's go ahead and go from Griffith Peak to the right, Harris Mountain, and then to the right of that, Mummy Mountain. And then below Mummy, to the right, Fletcher Peak. And then, yeah, as long as we're in the neighborhood, Angel Peak. And then you can see Kyle Canyon, Harris Springs Road area. There's the Sheep Range. Gas Peak. And just a little bit of the North Las Vegas area. There's what I call Sky Canyon Ridge. Back down in the North Las Vegas area. And then to complete the picture, there are the La Madre Mountains. La Madre, El Padres to the right. There's La Madre, El Padre, and I believe that's Burnt Peak, not sure. I actually hope it's not, because I got to go down there. And if I'm all the way at Burnt Peak, boy, it's going to be a long way back. Okay, so there you have it. What you can see from the south high point on the Wilson Ridge. And then, of course, looking through these burned mountain mahogany to the ridge line I am heading for. So, yeah, let's go ahead and head in that direction. Okay, a few things I missed on the high point. I headed over to the next hump, which is the actual high point. Here's the little mound that marks the summit. Now we're going to look down to Torino Ranch. Too much glare, hope you can see it. And if you look over to the right, you'd be looking at Lovell Summit Road. Maybe you can see the line on the video. And then just wanted to show you Sexton Ridge. This is where I normally summit the ridge and then head up to the right. to Griffith Peak. And then to the right of Griffith Peak, Charleston Peak. We didn't see that before. And then here's a better look at the upper Wilson Ridge up to Harris Mountain. And you can see Lovell Canyon below us. There you have it. Now I need to hightail it south on the Wilson Ridge. Okay, check in a few times as we're heading down the new territory. This is heading down the ridge, Wilson Ridge, from the south high point above us. And here you can see the line that we're going to follow. That line, the tree line there. So let's go. And by the way, yeah. So we haven't come very far. This is the summit of the Wilson Ridge. See the Rainbow Mountains in the distance. So here we go. Okay, this next section may be one of the steepest, if not the steepest, that is left today. Straight down this direction. Okay, we have been on a fairly untouched section of the Wilson Ridge, but yeah, this is even more untouched than the one that we ascended to that south high point. And this is the ridge line that we'll be following. And then looking back, this is that steep incline that we just descended from the Wilson Ridge high point. I should say the Wilson Ridge South High Point. And then looking around, definitely you can see ponderosa pines that have been burned, and smaller trees, shorter trees are pinyon pines and mountain mahogany. Okay, let's get up on that next ridge. Okay, we've descended. Now we're going to ascend up to the next ridge and then take that ridge top in this direction. And we'll see how far we get. My turnaround is going to be in about 2.5 hours. Or not turnaround, but when I head down to Lovell Canyon. And just looking around, yeah, really sad burn area here. This is looking back up to the high point. That was what I call the Wilson Ridge South High Point. Okay, so here we go, a little bit down and then up along this ridge top. Well, there are very few signs of people ever being on this ridge. Here are some. Maybe this brush was sawn off during the fire to create a fire break. And you can see the results of a past fire. And there's the south high point. We've just descended from that, and now we are ascending. We should reach another high point soon. That ridge line we looked at earlier. Okay, there's the south high point. We just descended from that point. There's Griffith Peak, Sexton Ridge leading up to it. Wilson Ridge to Harris Mountain. Deer Creek Road. That's the road between Kyle Canyon and Lee Canyon. Looking down, sheep range right behind the burned trees there. Las Vegas Valley. Gas Peak. La Madre Mountains through the trees. La Madre on the left, El Padre on the right. Okay, now we're going to head up in this direction to continue the Wilson Ridge. Okay, looking back on the South High Point, and we're now traversing the Wilson Ridge. And that high point, that high ridge that we saw from the South High Point. And here we are in the forest. Mountain mahogany, pinyon pines, kind of a pygmy forest. This is where we're headed. This is our next high point. As we continue south on the Wilson Ridge. And yeah, we should be seeing from that high point, we should be looking down on Bridge Mountain, Rainbow Mountain, and Mount Wilson. And there's looking over to Lovell Canyon. south high point in the center. Next high point. The forest here with my hat that is blowing off my head. Okay, time to check in. There's the south high point. And you can see we've made some distance here. You see Griffith Peak a little bit to the right, Sexton Ridge behind, heading down to the left from Griffith Peak. This is what it looks like up here on the Wilson Ridge. There's the Torino Ranch. We got to end up back there. And here's the direction going forward. There's another high point ahead. There's that lower area. I seem to remember we need to be on this side of that lower area. We'll see what happens. Okay, onward. Well, here's a little open area. Middle of nowhere. This is looking back. And then looking around, still on the Wilson Ridge, but we need to be navigating to where we can continue along the top of the ridge. So here we go. Well, there's some old friends, La Madre Mountains. And then La Madre Mountains ridgeline. Damsel Peak, Turtlehead Peak, and Las Vegas Strip. Okay, continuing along, I'm going to need to be looking for a way down soon, because if I don't, we'll be running out of light. Okay, onward. Well, I've reached the point now where it's time to begin turning down to Lovell Canyon. So I'm going to be angling down the ridge that I'm on and just see where it takes me. There's some open areas, so that's what I'll work to stick to, and then just to give you an idea where we are. I'm sure this helps. Probably have a better idea when we reach the Lovell Canyon Road. Okay, I finally come out of the brush and the forest, and I'm coming down a different ridge than the one that I ascended. There is the Wilson Ridge South High Point, and you can see my route was along the summit of that ridge. And let's see if we can get the whole thing in. So there's the Wilson Ridge. I almost went up to that next high point, and that would have been a good descent had I done that, but wow, the forest was just so thick, it was hard to navigate. So anyway, heading down this hopefully good ridge. I don't think it's the ridge that I came up, but who knows? Anything goes until we get a little further down and can see where we are here. But this has been so far just an experience on this whole area of the lower Wilson Ridge. I have further to go, and maybe I'll go up Rocky Gap Road and then ascend to that point over there. I do want to finish the ridge, but it looks like this was like a halfway to the end of the ridge. There is Lovell Summit Road. Lovell Summit Road. We're shooting for that. Should be interesting, because I don't know what the nature of this ridge is going to be. Okay, onward. Okay, we're back on track. I navigated through all those hills and washes, and it was a little difficult to get the big picture of where I was, but anyway, this is back on the pathway, the original pathway to the south high point for Wilson Ridge. And what we've done today, I'll trace it. Okay, so you can pretty much see the section of the Wilson Ridge that we covered today. It's a pretty big swath. And then we headed down, I believe it was this ridge. Okay, so all that's left is this ridge ahead, which we've been on earlier today. And just for bearings, there's the Torino Ranch. Okay, finishing up. Okay, the lighting is just right, the view is just right. So here is a retracing of the adventure today. This ridge up to the south high point, then south high point to the right, Wilson Ridge, and I think that I came down this ridge. That ridge put me down in a wash and in a whole lot of hills and pretty much no visibility. So I made my way back to this ridge, which is the ridge that I started out with. Now I've navigated up to this point. All that remains is to navigate ahead to that point and then down to Lovell Canyon Road. Yeah, I would say in retrospect, boy, it takes a lot of energy to get up to that south high point. But now I've navigated over to, halfway, almost to that next high point. And I think what I'm going to do is come up from Rocky Gap Road and reach that high point and make it to close the gap, basically. Once I hit that high point, there's still maybe a 600-foot gap in the ridge that I've covered. So that will close the gap all the way from the south high point to Rocky Gap Road. And that will be the Wilson Ridge all the way to that point. And then we'll look at the Wilson Ridge from Rocky Gap Road onward. And you can see that it continues on. We'll want to be on that ridge. And then we want to do the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridge line. And then we'll have the entire Wilson Ridge all the way up to Harris Mountain and the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridge line all the way from Highway 190 to Red Rock Canyon. So that's the goal. So let's continue on and get back home.